Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 6 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Melissa Whitecross, coming to you live from Johannesburg. A big congratulations to our co-host, Andrew de Block, and the BirdLife South Africa team. News hot off the press is that BirdLife South Africa was a double winner at the annual African Responsible Tourism Awards held at the World Travel Market Africa Expo today. We won gold in the diversity and inclusion category for our community bird guides and the SANSAB project, as well as a silver in the nature positive tourism category, for which Ngula also got a mention alongside our community bird guides. Our gold award goes through to the international competition, and the results of that will be announced at the World Travel Market Expo in London in November. A massive congrats to the BirdLife South Africa team and Andrew in particular. We have 130 episodes recorded and available on YouTube, so if you miss out because of load shedding or your Tuesday nights have gotten too busy with in-person events, never fear, you can always catch up with us later on YouTube. And tonight we travel to an island paradise where the Dodo once roamed. I was lucky enough to meet tonight's incredible speaker at the Pan-African Ornithological Congress in Victoria Falls last November. Dr Vikash Tatayah is the Conservation Director of the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation and has been active in conservation for over 26 years. He's also the co-chair of the IUCN Mascarene Island Plant Specialist Group and Global Council and African Regional Council member of BirdLife. His PhD study on the round island petrel uncovered the first ever recorded three-way vertebrate species hybrid complex in the world. Vikash manages conservation programs on Mauritius, Rodrigues, and outer islands that have allowed the recovery of a long list of threatened plants and animals. Under his leadership, many new projects and collaborations were set up, including the reintroduction of several endemic birds and seabirds, captive breeding of several species such as the Mauritius fody, Mauritius olive waikai, and Mauritius cuckoo shrike, the relaunch of red listing of plants of Mauritius and Rodrigues, and the setting up of a field station on Round Island. He's also been very active in setting up a human Mauritius fruit bat conflict resolution project, and Vikash has over 70 publications in peer-reviewed journals, authored and co-authored several books and chapters, and has reviewed several scientific articles. He's featured in a very long list of local and international press, news, and documentaries as well. Vikash is also an esteemed awardee and has won and accepted several prizes, including the JCI Mauritius Outstanding Young Person, which he took in 2009. He was also one of 50 awardees who received the Ladifi Media Award in 2018 for the 50th independence anniversary of the Republic of Mauritius. And he was granted the IUCN Species Survival Commission Chair's Citation of Excellence in 2019 and 2020. He also received the BirdLife Global Partnership Award in 2022. Sure, Vikash, you are a star-studded speaker tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Mauritius is one of my absolute favorite places to visit, and I cannot wait to hear what you have to share with all of us tonight. So that's enough from me. Let's hand over to you to take us to your beautiful island. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Melissa. I just need to thank all the staff of BirdLife South Africa, Christina, Anlene, Bronwyn, Andrew, Mark, especially, and all the friends of Mauritian Wildlife Foundation and our staff. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to present to you some of the work that we've been doing in Mauritius tonight, and I hope that will make you want to book a trip to Mauritius very, very soon. So here we go. All right, is that working? Your end, Melissa?
It is. Go for it, Vikash. Thank you.
Great. So, conservation in the land of the dodo. Who has not heard of the dodo? The dodo came from Mauritius, a symbol of extinction, but for us, it is a symbol of revival. And we'll talk more about that during this presentation. Now, Melissa said that Mauritius is part of the Mascarene. So there's three little islands that you find east of South Africa. So Mauritius, Réunion, and Rodrigues are what we collectively call Mascarenes. Today, I will talk about Mauritius and Rodrigues, which are what we call the Republic of Mauritius, and a few islands that are dotted around some close around Mauritius and Rodrigues, but some very far away. Now, when we talk of a biodiversity hotspot, what that means, it is a place which has got high biodiversity, high endemic biodiversity, but also great threats. Now, if we span back 4.5, 5 centuries ago, before men started leaving a footprint on Mauritius, this, if you were one of the people landing on Mauritius, this is what you would have seen. Lots of ebonies, lots of hardwoods, palms, dodo, as you can see here, but also tortoises and flycatchers. And if you went in one of the swamps, you would have seen flamingos, which we no longer see around, ducks, gray parrots, harriers, blue pigeons, coots, tortoises, dodo, rails, and the list goes on and on and on. And if you went to one of the offshore islands, of course, you would have seen many of the reptiles, which you would also have found on the mainland of Mauritius, but also some unique vegetation as well. Now, the first people to land on Mauritius is thought to be in the 12th to 14th century. Arabs, probably Malays, Indo-Malays, and the first Europeans to touch Mauritius were the Portuguese in the early 1500s, but they didn't leave much of a footprint as far as we know. Possibly cats may have arrived with them and rats may have arrived with them, but we're not quite sure. But the first nation to visit Mauritius and to actually settle the island were the Dutch. They were coming from Netherlands, trying to find a way around the Cape to the Spice Islands, what we know as Batavia, which is today Indonesia, and trying to make fortune by making the way to Indonesia and the way back loaded with spices. So this is the first time that they discovered Mauritius. They weren't expecting to find the muscarines, and they found it by accident. And then they thought to themselves, well, this is a nice midway between South Africa, the Cape, and Batavia. We'll make it a stopover point for the voyagers, for the sailing voyages going to the east. And indeed, they settled here and on Mauritius because they found that the place had lots of hardwoods, had plentiful water, had lots of wildlife. And this is the first time that you see the dodo, but also the tortoises, which they are burning down here to burn the fat out, but bats, echo parakeet, pink pigeons, and the broad-billed parrot, and frigate birds, and so on and so forth. Now, these are Dutch sailors making ships, but also, this is probably a mast which has been done here. Some of the sailors are fishing, some are collecting water, and you can see the three united colors of Netherlands. So we do have a shared history between South Africa and Mauritius, because the same Europeans that settled or colonized South Africa also colonized Mauritius back then. We are talking the colonization itself took place between 1610 and 1710. Unfortunately, not only was there some harvest of wood, but there was also catching of birds for the journey. You can see here gray parrots, Mauritian gray parrots, and also tortoises, dodos in the background. And you can see a ship waiting to take the cargo off. So there was a lot of hunting right from the start. But with the various nationalities that also came rats and cats and a host of other predators and invasive alien species, which I'll talk briefly to you about later on. Unfortunately, all of this activity would lead to the demise of a large number of birds, mammals. Well, the bats are the only mammals to have colonized the muscarines, but also reptiles that have gone extinct, including a red rail, 2 species of tortoises on Mauritius, 2 on Rodrigues, 1 on Iranian. We've lost a blue parrot here on Mauritius and 1 on Rodrigues. This is the largest parrot that's probably ever existed, the broad-billed parrot, which also has gone extinct. And also this one of the largest lizards ever to have existed, but we've also lost 2 species of bats here on Mauritius. So, but the most famous of extinctions was the dodo. Now, there had been extinctions prior to the dodo, but with the dodo, it was the first time that men realized that through his actions, he could drive his species to extinction. And this is what makes the dodo as an extinction something very important, because we could argue that the birth of ecological consciousness and conservation actually came regretfully with the demise of the dodo. Now, not only the dodo went extinct, as I said before, you also had the broad-billed parrot, you had the frigate bird, which we no longer find breeding around our waters. The tortoises have gone. 2 of 3 bat species have gone, and the one that survives is much reduced compared to what it was. Echo parakeet population is lower than it was. Pink pigeon the same. Probably we have less fish today than we had in the past. And also the plants, we've had extinctions of probably 9 to 10% of plants that have gone extinct on Mauritius already. And what's surviving is declined severely. Now, today we'll try to focus on birds, and we believe there were 30 species of native birds, 24. In fact, this figure is going up and up because there are now more species being discovered through osteological research. So let's take this figure for the time being. But 80% of the birds that you would have seen on Mauritius were unique to Mauritius, so not found anywhere else in the world. Unfortunately, 15 of the 24 endemic birds have gone extinct. In fact, this is a low number because we are still, just a few weeks ago, another species just got described from bones. So high extinction rate, but the good news is there are still 9 birds around that you can see that are unique in the world. And for all of you out there who are twitchers, Mauritius should be the next spot on your list. Now, not only was there extinction, but there was also deforestation. Now, deforestation, of course, is closely related to extinction itself. Now, you could see that in the middle, so the Dutch left Mauritius because they found the Cape to be better than Mauritius a century later on. So by 1710, they left. And in 1721, the French took over Mauritius. And since then, the people have stayed for good on Mauritius. The French developed agriculture, and you can see what's in white here is native forest that has been cleared. So all these areas have been cleared by the French. And in 1810, there was a battle on Mauritius, and the British took over the island. And the British expanded sugarcane. And you can see by 1835, there were large areas of Mauritius that had been cleared. And still by in the middle of the British era on Mauritius, you can see more areas of forest being cleared, and you'd have thought that would be the end of it. Unfortunately not. The clearance of forests on Mauritius continued in the 1900s, and we became independent in 1968. And in 1997, we did a survey of forests of Mauritius, and we calculated that there were less than 2% of good quality native forests on Mauritius. And it is largely within these areas that we are trying to do some of the conservation that we are doing. Now you can see here pictorially, you know, how the forest has declined on Mauritius. And unfortunately, forest destruction is not just a thing of the past. Now, if you look at modern day Mauritius, this is really an exercise which is just hot out of the oven. All the red little spots are where forests have been cleared between 1990 and 2021. And according to a government report, which is to come out very soon, between the year 2003 and 2014, and there's no reason to believe that it hasn't continued after that, we've been losing about 1,000 hectares of forest on Mauritius. It may not sound a lot, but Mauritius is not a big island. We are 1,870 odd square kilometers. So despite having the deforestation, or in addition to deforestation and poaching and hunting, we've had introduction of a number of invasive plants here, and a number of introduced animals, which you can see here: mongooses, cats, monkeys, tenrecs, but also deer, snails, wolf snake. But probably the worst offender is the rat argue. On top of that, a number of birds have been introduced to Mauritius and have become very common. Some of them are turning out to be quite big pests, such as the Asian crows, and I'll come back to the Asian crow later. And the lowest point in terms of biodiversity of Mauritius was probably in the 1970s, when the Kestrel almost went extinct. The round island boa, one did go extinct in 1975, and his cousin almost went extinct as well, but has been saved. And other forms of wildlife also became very rare, and some of the habitats, critical habitats, were actually in grave danger. So we recorded in the 1970s the rarest bird of prey, being the Mauritius kestrel, of which there was just 4 known birds and a single breeding female. We also had the pink pigeon, which became the rarest pigeon back then. We also had the echo parakeet, which became the rarest parrot with low numbers, as you can see here. And I know this is not a bird, but the Rodrigues fruit bat also became the rarest fruit bat, rarest mammal in the world. It was at around this time that the government called in Sir Peter Scott from the World Wildlife Fund to come and establish a report on what should be done. And this was actually a turning point in the 1970s with the establishment of captive breeding programs for the 3 large surviving birds. So those were the 3 birds that gained first attention in the 1970s. And the kestrel, as I mentioned before, was the bird that really teetered on the edge of extinction, with only 1 known breeding female. And this bird was facing a lot of pressures from introduced mammals, namely rats, monkeys that would eat the eggs and the young of kestrels. They'd also kill some of the monkeys, would also kill the adults. Indian mongooses that have been introduced to Mauritius would also kill fledglings or young birds that come to the ground, and the cats would also kill the kestrels. But the worst problem was organochlorides. So the use of especially DDT, which became used on a large scale from the end of the war up to 1980. And back then, we didn't quite know what were the effects of these organochlorides and organophosphates. But for those of you who are not aware, the use of these pesticides to control malaria and through controlling mosquitoes leads to eggshell thinning and low embryonic survival, but also the chicks come out debilitated. And so the use of organochlorides from the 40s to the 70s was really the biggest problem for the Mauritius kestrel. And it was at that time that this is a quote which now become famous from Norman Myers, who wrote a book called The Sinking Ark, basically saying, forget about the kestrel, it's not going to make it, use your energy and your time, your money into something else. Now, in conservation, you live with a lot of hope. I mean, this is your fuel. And those of us who are in conservation know that. And sometimes you need to be stubborn. And this is this person, Professor Carl Jones, who is the founder or one of the founders of the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation, who came here in 1979 with a mission. His mission was to close down the project and to go back home. And in fact, he came here, but he decided that he would not close down the project, but he will try to save those species. And indeed, he put all his heart and energy into it, and he eventually founded the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation in 1984. Next year, we are celebrating our 40th anniversary, and he started turning around this project, started hatching eggs in captivity, setting up breeding pairs, making sure they hatched out and they grew well, making sure they could be put out in nest boxes in the wild. And also, he designed nest boxes that were going to be safe from monkeys. So he made the nest boxes to be longer than the arm of a monkey, so the monkey couldn't get to the scrape of the birds at the back of the nest box. And nest boxes is something which we are 40 years on, we are still working on. And I will show you that later on. But the nest boxes have made management of the bird much easier than they would otherwise. So you can see here a picture of the nest boxes. Originally, they were made out of wood, but being given of the rain and the heat on Mauritius, and termites, the wood doesn't last as long as we would have expected. Now, we were released hacking birds, as those who are in falconry would know. We were hacking birds. We were soft releasing birds as well, feeding them until they reach independence. In fact, we still do that. And this year we did it with a bunch of kestrels. And we have had a fantastic team of volunteers and staff that have come from all the corners of the world and also from Mauritius that do the intense field work. And kestrels nest in cliff faces. So some of these areas are inaccessible by foot, obviously, so you need to rappel down to them. But you get to the chicks, we ring every single chick, we take morphometrics, we take blood for disease studies. And in fact, we have a very good database on not just the Mauritius kestrel, but also the pink pigeon, the echo parakeet, the fodies, the olive white eyes, the petrels, some of the best databases for any invertebrate species in the world. And this allows us to look at genetics, to look at survival, to look at inbreeding, to look at climate effects of climate change, and a host of other things. Now, I also mentioned earlier on that we've been looking at nest boxes. So this goes through, has gone and continues to go through evolution almost every year or so. So right now we are making those nest boxes out of recycled plastic so that they can be longer lasting. And we made them shorter so that then they are not as heavy, but we put a baffle here so that even the hen of a monkey wouldn't be able to go around the bend. So there are many of these improvements that we're doing all the time on kestrels and on nest boxes of kestrels. And later on, I'll show you echo parakeets. And this is an area that I was at the POAC recently, as Melissa said, and there was I didn't realize there was so much interest in nest boxes. And this is certainly something that we can exchange with our colleagues on the mainland of Africa. Now, the Kestrel has been hailed as the most successful raptor restoration program in the world. You can see here Professor Tom Cade, who founded the International Council for Bird Preservation in Idaho in the US and saved a lot of falcons and peregrines and so on around the world, and falcons and birds of prey around the world. And he recognized that the Mauritius Kestrel was the most successful of all the raptor projects. Now, the Kestrel wasn't just an end in itself. Work is still continuing, of course, but we argued that the Kestrel needed a safe habitat. And prior to 1994, there was not a national park in Mauritius. So we argued that the Kestrel needed a safe habitat, and we did all the talking to ministers and even to the Prime Minister, who we got to feed a Kestrel, and we told him, back then, no, I wasn't there then, it was Carl Jones who was there and Wendy Stram, and they convinced the Prime Minister that this area of forest, the largest area of forest on Mauritius, should be made a national park. And indeed, thanks to the work on the Mauritius Kestrel, the Black River Gorges was proclaimed as the first national park of Mauritius. And a visitor could, there are many trails in this park, and of course I'll invite you to come and see the Kestrel in this park, and also pink pigeons, echo parakeets, and a host of other birds. We'll talk about that later. But last year we were really very proud, because we went up to the minister during a visit to our captive breeding center, and we said to the Minister of Agro-Industry then, we said to him, look, we would like to propose that the Mauritius Kestrel become the national bird of Mauritius, because we did not have a national bird before that. Everybody thought it was the dodo, but of course it wasn't the dodo. And so the idea was warmly received, and within 2 weeks it went through Parliament and was agreed. So this became the national bird a year ago. So you can proudly say that this bird that was saved from extinction is our national bird now. But conservation, we've shown that through the Mauritius Kestrel that conservation can work, but not just can it work to help into making a national park, but also it has to drive whole ecosystems restoration. And in fact, the work on the Kestrels has actually, how can I say, driven the work on islands, on other species, including the pink pigeon, which is my next species on the list. So this is the last pigeon of the mascarenes. All the other pigeons have gone extinct. A very beautiful pigeon and very important in our forest. And we have been working again with a host of volunteers and staff from across the world and Mauritius itself to save this pigeon from extinction. Now, this pigeon in the 1980s was projected to go to extinction. There was a population viability assessment done then, and showing that the pink pigeon would go extinct by around 1990. So we needed to do a lot of work, and it showed that cyclones were having quite a big impact. But we also know now that forest deforestation, predators, diseases, there's trichomonas, which is a big threat to the chicks of the pink pigeon. So we needed to address all of these different factors. And indeed, we have, by breeding pink pigeons in the wild, in captivity, releasing in the wild, providing supplementary food, doing predator control. Cats are a big problem, and rats are a big problem. So we do need to control them around the sites where we are releasing these birds. We also do control mongooses, which will kill pink pigeons that spend a lot of time foraging on the ground and twigging on the ground. And we managed to increase the bird to over 400, and the species have been downlisted to vulnerable in 2018. Prior to that, it was critically endangered. So it went from critically endangered to vulnerable. And I'll show the graph later. The management has remained pretty much standard. There's captive breeding and rearing, which is ongoing, and we have a program which we are going to beef up in Black River on the west of Mauritius. And we've been releasing birds at populations where they're now doing very well. And one thing that we've found out is that there are birds that are in captivity in the UK, taken there in the late 70s and early 80s by Gerald Durrell. And now you have birds in several zoos in UK and Europe and even in America. And we found that those birds have around 9% genetic diversity, which is not present on Mauritius anymore. So we are doing a repatriation of birds from UK zoos, but birds that have genes that are no longer present on Mauritius. So it's genetic management, and it's very rare. Everybody talks about genetic management, but it's very rare that you're getting to a stage where you're actually implementing genetic management. Because of the success of the pigeon nowadays, you find them at two public picnic areas, and unfortunately, at one of them, some of them are getting killed by by vehicles. So we've addressed a letter to the authorities to say that we've got to try to put in systems to reduce roadkill. I mean, this is a new threat. It's never existed in the 40, 50 years of the project, and it's a new threat which we are going to meet. Now, we are trying to aim to get 600 birds and to do genetic management on this species. And now you can see the graph of the population. It's been increasing, and it stayed more or less around 400, 450 birds. And in recent years, it's picked up again, and it almost touched 600. But like pigeon populations, they go up and down, and we are quite confident with the current state of management that will go above 600 in due course. The other species that we've worked intensively with is the echo parakeet. Again, the last parrot of the mascarenes. There was a very closely related bird on Réunion Island, which has gone extinct. And in fact, over the past 2-3 years, we've been discussing very closely with Réunion authorities. Réunion is part of France, for those of you who are not aware. And so we've been discussing with partners there on Réunion, and we are looking at possibilities of reintroducing the bird on Réunion. So we've done a feasibility study, which has proved to be correct, positive for the reintroduction of this bird, and we are going to work on that. But back to the echo parakeet, this bird went down to just 8 to 12 known birds in the 1980s, including at the time just 2 or 3 breeding females. So we've done a lot of captive breeding of this species. We've released in the wild in several places on Mauritius, and supplementary feeding was important. We got a lot of input and guidance from New Zealand Department of Conservation, where they've got several species of parrots that are on the verge of extinction as well. So there was a lot of exchange between Mauritius and New Zealand in terms of techniques, including supplementary feeding in the wild, but also putting up nest boxes for them. Why do we put up nest boxes? Is because the forest quality is degrading. The old trees with those cavities in them have, we believe, are becoming really scarce. And it also helps management to have nest boxes, because you can have the nest boxes along a road or close to a track rather than have it down, deep down in a gorge where there are now more parakeets in nest boxes than in natural cavities. And also really cetacine beak and feather disease hit us. Just as you have it in South Africa, we got it in Mauritius, and we've had to adapt our management to try to cope with the disease. You can see here one of the workers, one of the field staff, putting on this Tyvek suit just to try to reduce the transfer of the virus from one nest to the other. We now know that PBFD is in the population, whatever we are going to do. And the population, the echo parakeet population, has overcome this problem very well, I would say. Now, nest boxes, again, as I mentioned, previously you see this nest box was made out of non-treated wood. It didn't last very long, but now our team on the ground are doing these nest boxes out of PVC pipes, much lighter, and with a cover on top, which is from alucobond, which doesn't rot. It's an aluminium and plastic product, and so this is doing very well. And we use recycled plastic, so that you can see that there's a lot of evolution from the first nest box to the nest box that I showed you just previously, and this nest box here. And this goes through evolution all the time, trying to perfect it. And we hope that these nest boxes will last 10, 15 years, rather than 2 or 3 years as they were lasting previously. Now, the echo parakeet was downlisted in 2019. We have more than between 700 and 800 birds. We've established new populations in recent years through reintroductions. We have been reviewing our management because of the presence of this disease called PBFD, cetacine beak and feather disease. We have had breeding at some of the recent subpopulations that we've created. We are still collaborating with the private sector for releases at a place called Ebony Forest. So we've done that for 3 consecutive years. We do oppose invasive alien parrots, so the introduction of parrots onto Mauritius, because we are arguing with the authorities that those parrots could come in with other strains of PBFD or other diseases which we do not have on Mauritius. So we have a very tough stand on when it comes to importation of not just invasive parrots, but anything that is likely to become invasive. We are currently aiming to have over 1,000 birds on Mauritius. We are looking at low-level management. You know, we have 190 nest sites. Are we going to be able to monitor all of these nest sites? So we're looking at probably monitoring a sample of these nest sites. In fact, we've got a PhD student who is just going to start. He's on the call, who's just going to be looking at that, and it's quite exciting. Again, we'll keep working on durable nest boxes. We might do more releases in Fernie Valley. Fernie is in the southeast of Mauritius. If you do come to Mauritius, please make it a point to visit Fernie Valley, beautiful valley with some of the species we've been reintroducing there. And of course, we are working on putting the parrots back on Réunion. So this is hailed as the most successful parrot restoration project in the world, arguably. And after working on the 3 large birds, which I talked to you about, we said, let's try to tackle the smaller birds. We thought that was a different kettle of fish, sorry for the pun. When we started the work, this was a species which was declining from surveys that were done in the 70s, in the 90s, the 2000s. We knew that the population was declining. There were just 100 to 130 pairs in the Black River Gorges National Park. None outside. And we decided to do something which was called marooning, which the New Zealanders have been doing for a long time, which is taking birds and putting on an island. And we argued that Îles Aigrettes was not just a maroon island, it was a reintroduction, because we actually found out from historical work that was done by another researcher in Netherlands, and from old ship logs, that there was a bird that describes nothing other than the Fodies that was present on Îles Aigrettes or on the coastline of Mauritius. So we argued that we could put back Fodies on Îles Aigrettes, and indeed we did so. And we, in a short period of time, we got hundreds or if not more of these birds, and that was enough to allow for downlisting of the species. So one of the quickest downlisting that's ever been done. And the downlisting happened when we had over 200 birds on Îles Aigrettes. So this is the island which I'll talk to you a bit later about. And this is where we maroon the birds. In fact, it was a reintroduction onto this island. So the bird was downlisted in 2009 to endangered in 2009. We did a survey in 2014, which showed that there were around 330 birds on mainland Mauritius, and we had up to 400 birds on Îles Aigrettes. So there were more birds on this island, which is 26 hectares, than there was on the mainland of Mauritius. So that just goes to show how important marooning or reintroducing birds on islands can be. And in fact, what happens on this island is that there are no monkeys, there are no rats. The habitat has been restored. So the birds are in total security, and their population increases. And unfortunately, the story has got one cloud to it, which is the Asian crows. So Asian crows arrived in Mauritius through ships in the 1950s, and we had got nearly to 500 birds on Îles Aigrettes, and we are still going to do the mainland survey of mainland island birds, which we are planning to do in the next year or so. But Asian crows have actually hit on the species. So you can see this population on Îles Aigrettes was really going beyond 450, might even have touched 500, until crows started liking Îles Aigrettes. And so the crows are a big problem. I understand that in South Africa, you're trying to control the crows, and you have every reason to try to eradicate or control them. And we are trying to, we've put in a proposal to the government to actually do an eradication of crows on Mauritius. There are annual crow control exercises on Mauritius, but we feel that what Mauritius needs is an eradication of the crows, because not only it's bad news for us on Mauritius, because they attack reptiles and they take birds, native birds and endemic birds, but they also carry diseases. But also the other reason is because we are shipping them out to other countries as well from the large population we have on Mauritius. So crows have started impacting on our passerines, the Mauritius Fodie, and you can see this is where, so it's the first visit of crows on the island was 2015. The number of crows, this is not the population of crows, by the way, but the number of crows became more increased in time. And last year we did one thing: we poisoned the crows on the mainland of Mauritius, opposite Îles Aigrettes, and you can see the population has already started reacting to that. You can see an increase. So this is just by poisoning 17 crows on the mainland of Mauritius, crows that go from the mainland to Îles Aigrettes. Now, the other species that we decided to work with is the Mauritius olive white-eye. Now, this white-eye is currently the only critically endangered species that we have. When we started working with this bird in early 2000s, there were less than 100 pairs. And again, surveys in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s had shown that there was a continuous decline in this species. We managed to rear the birds in captivity, and we released some birds onto Îles Aigrettes, following the success that we had with the Mauritius Fodie. Now, one thing which I'd like to share with you is this, raising probably one of the smallest chicks that's ever been hen reared from egg to being released on Îles Aigrettes was this bird. And that was done by somebody who today is working with you in South Africa on the Hornbill project, on the ground Hornbill project. So we've developed a lot of skills here on Mauritius in terms of hen rearing. And some of these were things that had never been tried before, or we've adapted or perfected them. We have a population of between 60 and 70 birds on Illozic Red. They are territorial. So on this small 26-hectare island, we've learned that we are not going to be able to get hundreds of like Mauritius 40s, but we should just think of having perhaps less than 100 birds on the island. Now, the olive white-eye is still critically endangered, but we are going to try to work with this. We have some partners also in Mauritius that are keen to work on this. We will be very shortly working on a management plan for the species across all the partners. And the last survey that we did on Mauritius showed that there were around between 180 and 270 birds on the mainland of Mauritius, more than 60 on Illozic Red. So this current management was doing well because the birds were slowly increasing. We've done a lot of work in terms of improving supplementary feeding and making it less cumbersome. And we are going to try to address the declining population on mainland of Mauritius. So we haven't forgotten our mainland of Mauritius. And we've been helping this other NGO that we are partnered with to do releases at a place called Ebony Forest, which is in the southwest of Mauritius. And we are the BirdLife species champion for the species, and we take this at heart. The challenge again here has been the Asian crows. And we would like to do a survey of the mainland population very soon. And also we're trying to reintroduce bird to a mainland island. Now, I will tell you about the mainland island in just a while. So again, here you can see the population numbers on Illozic Red. Unfortunately, crows again appearing around 2015 and impacting on this bird. And you can see how the birds have reacted just by the fact that we've just killed 17 odd crows on that were using Illozic Red. Now, mainland island. Mainland island is difficult for us to control rats over hundreds of hectares of Mauritius, in time probably. But what happens with a mainland island is that you have an area in which you are able to control rats. We've gone away from poison because research is showing poison stays in the soil for a long time. And we use these gadgets which are made in New Zealand. They're called A24 traps because they can kill up to 24 rats. So the rats, this is a CO2 canister. And every time a rat goes up there, there's a lure. So every time a rat goes and tries to find out what this lure is, there is a pin that strikes and kills the rat, and it rearms itself. So it's self-resetting. It resets itself, ready for the next kill. And we are experimenting this, and the results are very encouraging. We have control areas, very encouraging. We are just under 10 hectares of this mainland island. We are discussing with government and other organizations if we can increase this to probably 20 hectares, if not more. And within this mainland island, which is going to be a haven for rare plants, pigeons can use it, echo parakeets can use it, but we hope to reintroduce olive white-eyes in that safe area, this predator safe area. Now, I've talked a lot about captive breeding. The captive breeding that we've done is done at a place called the Gerald Durrell Endemic Wildlife Sanctuary, named after the famous Gerald Durrell, who has supported a lot of work in Mauritius and continues to do so through the Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust. Now, this center has been very important for breeding kestrels, pigeons, echo parakeet, Mauritius foodies, olive white-eyes, but we also do a number of rescues every year. So these are bunch of seabirds that are brought to us, and we care for these birds. We often are able to rehabilitate those birds and release them again. This is just a sample of what we have received over the past month or so. But we also get bats, endemic bats that are brought to us, and we try to rehabilitate them as well. And we have a captive population of Rodrigues fruit bat there as well. So it's a very important center that I wanted to mention. Now, seabirds leads me to Round Island, a very, very important island north of Mauritius that was host to a unique type of forest where some rare plants are found, including this, which is the last of its kind. So this is the last palm of this variety. left on Round Island. It's the only one in the world left. We've been able to multiply this species, and now we are reintroducing it, the species. So the species, although was probably going to go extinct, is now safe because we have probably 100 seedlings that we have managed to get from this species now. But it's taken 25, 30 years to get to that stage. So we do a lot of work on plants. So I'm not going to talk about plants because that's going to be another talk if I start talking about plants or if I start talking about reptiles. So Round Island is unique in the world for hosting some of the last populations, or then the last populations of tail-faced kings, Round Island gecko. There's a gecko here, which you can see, which is the Gunther's gecko, but also the Round Island keel-scale boa. And the island was described as a haven for seabirds. This is going back to the 1880s. The first description of the islands go back to the 1840s, but right from the start, they describe the huge numbers of seabirds on this island, including white-tailed tropic bird, red-tailed tropic bird. We have between 60 and 100,000 pairs of wedge-tailed shearwater that nest on Round Island in season. And we have this world population, the only population of this species, the Round Island petrel, which Melissa talked about, this only known 3 species hybrid complex in the world, made up of Trindade petrel, Herald petrel, and Kermadec petrels. Unfortunately, goats and rabbits had been left on the island in the 1800s as stowaways, and they ate all the vegetation. And there's been massive soil loss on the island. And 1972, you would see that this palm forest, which was described from there, was going to go completely extinct. People used to go to these islands to hunt for goats and rabbits, and they would also take large numbers of seabirds. So the massacre of seabirds going up to this is from the 1980s, but this massacre of seabirds that was occurring annually, 40s, 50s, 60s, 80s, and even in the 1800s, it was to the point that it was really impacting on the numbers of seabirds on the island. We eventually got rid of goats and rabbits, thanks to these chaps who eradicated the rabbits they are New Zealanders, they are Kiwis, so they got rid of the rabbits from there. And the palm savanna just bounced back, but it needed some help from us. So we got rid of the rabbits, then we helped the palm savanna coming back, and we established a field station there in 2002. In fact, there's a new field station that's been built, but we also had to set up life systems on the island. There's no running water on the island, so we have to catch the water, every drop of water that we have to catch it from the slopes. And those slopes are where they're used to be forest. So that just tells you probably 1 meter or 2 of soil has gone. So we're working in very hostile conditions, but despite that, our team on Round Island are doing a fantastic work growing plants and trying to restore vegetation on the island. And we know that there are many plants that have gone extinct because there were botanical surveys done in 1870 and in the 1870s, and we have been reintroducing those plants. We are trying to recreate the hardwood forest that was described on the island. And this is the field station that we are building, which is very important because it allows scientists to stay on the island. And we have some invasive species. Unfortunately, a species you have in South Africa called Heteropogon contortus spear grass, which has arrived on the island in the 90s and which we're trying to control. We service the island by boat for a long time by the National Coast Guard boat, but now we're using some private boats. But the helicopter squadron of the Mauritius police force are very, very helpful to us, transporting material, people, but also tortoises to the island. So we are reintroducing tortoises. These are analogs. So our tortoises have gone extinct, and we are replacing it with another tortoise which comes from Aldabra in the Seychelles and these tortoises are fulfilling the ecological role. Going to this island or any island, we have a very, very strict quarantine, and touch wood, since over the past 20 years, we have not had any incursions of invasive plants or animals on the island as far as we know. Or if we have been able to detect and deal with it promptly. So very important, whichever island. You can see native plants growing in the background, tortoises doing their work in terms of controlling weeds and also seed dispersal. And we now enjoy forest on Round Island. So this is a forest which was gone for over 100 years. Now we have forest of endemic hardwoods on the island, but it's taken a lot of work to do that. Our presence on Round Island has also put an end to poaching. This is the last time that a poaching incident was discovered. So this is these are a mixture of wedge-tailed shearwater, white-tailed tropic bird, red-tailed tropic bird, but also Round Island petrels. And the populations of red-tailed tropic birds have just shot through the roof. There's probably about 8,000 pairs of red-tailed tropic bird. There's around 1,500 pairs of white-tailed tropic bird. Again, as I mentioned, 60 to 90,000 pairs of wedge-tailed shearwater. And annually, we have around 200 breeding pairs of the Round Island petrel, of which we've ringed probably 96, 97% of all the adults. Now, this is the Round Island petrel carrying a tag, a GLS tag. So it goes to places and it picks up geopositions on the Earth's surface, at sea, and it comes back. We pick the tag up, we decipher where it's been to, and we get these nice little maps of where individuals have been going to. So they are going all over the Indian Ocean, as you can see. So, but they also are going all the way up to around the Cape of South Africa, going to Brazil, to Trindade Island in the northeast of Brazil. And they're also going all the way around Australia, going to Lord Howe Island. So it's a species, sorry, it is a complex, a hybrid complex that's using 3 oceans, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Indian Ocean. So wonderful. And this work is very important because it's we've provided this data to the Marine Spatial Planning Department of Mauritius, and they are just coming out with the first Marine Spatial Plan for Mauritius, and largely based on some of the distribution of birds. And also we've used data from the BirdLife important bird areas to designate to try to work on the Marine Spatial Plan for Mauritius. Now, on Round Island, we are also working with trying to attract, these are Mars boobies. They breed here. There's about 40, 50 birds on this island. That's the only place that they breed in the masquerades. And Round Island is just 2 kilometers from there. And what we are doing here, like you do with penguins, is we're trying to attract them onto Round Island using decoys. These are fakes, and trying to use call playbacks. So we hope we'll be successful, as you guys have been. Now, very quickly, we also work on Illusive Red, this 26-hectare island, which I mentioned earlier on. Very important island because it's got a last type of vegetation now found nowhere else in the world, nowhere else on Mauritius for that matter. We've had to get rid of some of the predators that were on the island. Unfortunately, acacia, which I think you have in South Africa as well, is a very bad weed on the island, and manually we've been removing this weed, and you can see where the weed is, where the acacia is removed, there's practically no endemic plants left. And what we've had to do is to very quickly get back to these areas and replant in these open areas with plants that we grow in our nursery, endemic and native plants only, and we get very nice native vegetation like this in just a matter of a few years. We've reintroduced tortoises there, as I mentioned, and they are doing a great work at dispersing ebonies in their feces, and that's been wonders for the island, just as we've demonstrated on Round Island as well. We've been trying to we've reintroduced reptiles that had gone extinct from there. We've reintroduced rare plants. We've reintroduced the analog tortoises, And we are also trying to attract seabirds on the island. We have a visitor program, so if you do come to Mauritius, I regret to say that you will not be able to go to Round Island. At best, you could take a boat and go around the island, but you're welcome to come onto Île aux Aigrettes and see all the work that we are doing on the island, including saving these 3 species that I mentioned to you earlier on. We're trying to attract the seabirds back onto the island. Seabirds are very, very important for land, and now the connection between land and sea as mediated by seabirds is becoming more obvious through a number of very recent scientific research. So we know that there were seabirds on Île aux Aigrettes, and despite the fact that we got rid of cats and rats and poaching no longer happens on Île aux Aigrettes, they will probably not come back, or not come back soon without some assistance from us. Sorry, mozzies are going all around. So these are some of the decoys that we've been putting out. And so these are the real sooty terns, and these are decoys. So again, the sooty terns around the decoys, just like you have in South Africa. And so we've put back red-tailed tropic birds, white-tailed tropic birds, wedge-tailed shearwater, and this is a chick that we reintroduced them as chicks as well. And we've been going to Serpent Island, and we've taken common noddies, lesser noddies, and sooty terns, which we've been reintroducing on the island. Those figures add up to over 600 birds that have been released with a very high rate of survival. Unfortunately, none of the birds have come back because we believe that crows have been preventing them from returning. Now that we are controlling crows, the hope is that they will come back to the island, and we have call playbacks. So this is showing you the call playbacks that we've been trying to use since 2017, and decoys as well. Very quickly going to Rodrigues. Rodrigues was described as this wonderful island with lots of native birds and quite a number of endemic birds. Rodrigues is around 600 kilometers northeast of Mauritius. Unfortunately, it's a small island. It's only 109 kilometers square. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of deforestation and soil loss on Rodrigues, and cattle grazing and forest fires in the past. And unfortunately, much of the coastline of the habitat looks like this. However, we've been restoring habitats on Rodrigues, such as here at Grand Montagne. This is open to visitors. So if you do come to Mauritius, I would welcome you. I would really encourage you to go to Rodrigues and to discover the work that we're doing here on Rodrigues at Grand Montagne and in Anskitor Nature Reserve. And these areas have been very important for the resurrection of 2 species that went down to very low numbers in the 1970s, the Rodrigues fody and the Rodrigues warbler. These are arguably the most successful bird restoration programs in the world, because from a low of very low numbers, we now have an estimate of 20,000 birds on Rodrigues of the Rodrigues fody, and about 25,000 of the Rodrigues warbler. So in terms of magnitude, this actually makes it probably the most resounding increase of any bird project in the world. But we need to analyze this and to publish it. Now, a review done by BirdLife a few years ago, well, many years ago, 2004 now, and which has been taken up in several other studies more recently, have shown that 31 bird species have been saved from extinction. And 5 of these bird extinctions, extinction preventions, have been from Mauritius: the Kestrel, the pink pigeon, the echo parakeet, the Rodrigues fody, and the Rodrigues warbler. And so Mauritius is, despite all the odds, despite all the challenges, we are leading in terms of saving species. And we do a lot of outreach, and we are even doing more and more, not just on Rodrigues, but also on Mauritius. And we are also trying to, we do surveys of birds on 2 inshore islands of Rodrigues called Île Coco and Île Sable, which host lots of seabirds. And you know, if you do go to Rodrigues, this is a must to go to Île Coco. Île Sable is closed to visitors, but Île Coco is open to visitors. In February this year, we had quite a high mortality of birds. We feared that it may be avian influenza, which as you know, is going around the world. But thankfully, this was most probably due to food shortage, natural food shortage. But we are on the lookout for avian influenza, which I think we have been spared of, but with migratory birds and also illegal imports of animals into Mauritius or animal products, it remains something quite possible to reach us at some point. Now, finally, I'll talk to you about St. Brandon, which is these islands. So this is here Mauritius. So St. Brandon is this group of islands to the north of Mauritius. They are quite far away, 400 kilometers. And we have been working with Dodo Wildlife Conservation Trust, but also with some South Africans, including Henk Bouwman, who some of you know. We've done some studies there on seabirds and turtles and plastics and pollutants in the environment. So this is a bunch of around 35, 40 islands, and we've developed an institutional map. We've done publications as well. There are more than 1.2 million seabirds nesting on these islands. However, a lot of these islands have got rats, I've got rabbits, I've got mice, some have got chickens on them. Not that chickens are a big problem, but we have proposed a plan to eradicate these invasive animals, but also to control some of the plants. Some of the plants are taking over and reducing nesting habitats for seabirds. So I just wanted to say that our reach is not just Mauritius and our offshore islands, not just Rodrigues, but we are also looking at some of the archipelago very far to the north. In terms of downlisting, I think we are one of the organizations or one of the countries that has done more downlisting than any other country in the world, besides saving those species that I mentioned to you. And we thought that nothing could happen to us other than what I've told you about, all the different pressures, until we had this oil spill in 2020. So oil spill came about. We were not expecting it. We were not prepared, but we had to do. So this is Île aux Aigrettes, and the oil spill was less than 2 kilometers from Île aux Aigrettes. And we had to do everything to try to save the island. And we had to rescue lots of plants. Some of the birds we had to take off, and the reptiles. From the other islands, we actually rescued some reptiles, which we've sent to Jersey Zoo in the UK to try to, if in case there's extinction of these species, we can do a reintroduction as well. So if you do come to Mauritius, please look out for these birds, and they are wonderful birds, and learn about our conservation programs. And I also think that there are many opportunities for us to interact with South Africa. I think we can have a lot of exchanges around PBFD, because we've got it in our eco parakeets, just as you've got it in Cape Parrots. I think we can also exchange about nest box design. I think we can learn a lot from you in terms of oil spill management and how to deal with oil seabirds. I think we can learn of each other around seabird attraction. And soil erosion, we are already working with a number of South African researchers who have been researching Marion Island in terms of soil erosion. Professor Sumner, Professor Heading of University of KwaZulu, Fort Hare and Cape Town, Professor Nell. So we've been working with a lot of South Africans on soil erosion. But I also think control of invasive alien species is something that we can have lots of exchanges on. And one last thing is we've been discussing with Melissa quite a lot, and with Annelien, about having sharing your experience about working with businesses so that it benefits biodiversity. So we are hoping that this year at some point we will hold a business and biodiversity forum, trying to talk to our businessmen about how they can do good business and good biodiversity conservation. So thank you very much, and sorry if I've gone a bit over my time.
Vikash, we will forgive you. What a phenomenal story. I think Penny Abbott summarized tonight's talk in the perfect way. What a story, and what a storyteller. Thank you so much for sharing that incredibly inspiring encouraging talk with us tonight about Mauritius and Rodrigues and the incredible successes that you guys have had. I have no doubt that there are many challenges hidden behind those successes, but that you've triumphed and been able to bring these species back. I see the millions of little emojis flying across the screen here. I think our audience thoroughly enjoyed tonight's talk. Vikash, thank you so much for sharing that with us tonight.
Pleasure, my pleasure and my honor.
Brilliant. We've got a few questions, and we've certainly got time to ask them of you. And I'm going to start off with one from Ali Mutu. And I know this is something you and I have been chatting about a fair bit. He's talking about the challenge of habitat loss. And I think those maps you put on screen earlier in your talk really hit home for just how much of Mauritius's natural forests have been lost. And he says, with the huge deal on people outside who are purchasing huge areas in your country, being Mauritius, do you not consider that a threat to your habitats? And maybe if you could just elaborate a little bit on that and what you as the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation are trying to do to protect these habitats.
200% agreed on this. There's a lot of Mauritians that are buying land, but there's also a lot of foreign direct investment. So people from abroad that are who are coming to Mauritius and buying areas of land. Now, this is not just areas of sugarcane land. I wouldn't worry at all if it was sugarcane land. Some of it is, but some of it is on slopes of mountains. Those are areas where we have remnants of native forests. Those are areas where we have rare plants. Those are areas where we have very rare snails that are hanging on. I haven't talked about snails, but we have our snails are on the verge, a lot of them are on the verge of extinction. And it is a concern. For me personally, it is a concern, and I've been voicing it quite a lot about how we need to halt or slow down habitat loss on Mauritius. And there needs to be a change, and I'm talking to it on every single forum that I can talk on, but it's a lot of money. I mean, land is very expensive on Mauritius. Somebody who has land is selling it for something like 500,000 rand the acre, you know, and sometimes it's going for 2 million rands the acre. So people are selling. If they're getting that sort of money, they are selling. And whether it is on a slope of a mountain, whether it's got rare plants on it, they don't care with that money. So this is where we are discussing with governments, talking about land conversion, where we should be very strict on land conversion, especially on slopes, on mountains. River reserves is the other thing as well. There's some people crazy to have their land along river reserves, and that is causing problems because of flooding. We are getting a lot more flooding, and Mauritius has been blaming it very conveniently on climate change, but it's not just climate change, it's development in the wrong places.
Yeah, development in the wrong places is something I think we as a global society face, and it certainly is exacerbated on places like islands. I see we've got Rob Simmons with us tonight, and I know Rob is an avid Harrier fan, and he's written a question here saying a similar suggestion for the echo parakeet being reintroduced to Reunion was made for the Reunion Harrier back to Mauritius and the Mauritius Kestrel back to Reunion, adding to that long-term conservation of both species. What came of the suggestion, and are you pursuing this in any form? It's certainly an exciting possibility.
Rob, you're certainly very, very well informed. We did the proposal to put back some of the birds back onto Reunion is not new. It goes back to the 1970s, or if not the 80s. It's been suggested. I worked on it with other colleagues in the early 2000s, and nothing came of it. And it's taken a long time to come to the stage where we've come. And we've thought about which species we had most of, so the echo parakeet. Which species could we easily say you can take gradually 20, 30, 40, 50 and reintroduce? That was the echo parakeet. That was one of the reasons. Which species would have greater acceptance? So it's a lot of those conditions which made it that the SEO, Société d'études ornithologiques de la Réunion, Ornithological Society of Reunion, decided to push for the echo parakeet reintroduction. I think once we get in the hang of putting back one species, it may make it easier to put back the pink pigeon onto Réunion, because they had a closely related species on Réunion. So it would be an analog reintroduction in terms of the pink pigeon. And we'll work our way slowly to that. Regarding the harrier, the problem is we have a large feral cat population on Mauritius. Harriers breed on the ground, and we have mongooses, we have monkeys. So this needs a lot of thought into reintroducing the harrier. Of course, we'd love to have the harrier back on Mauritius, but we have a problem of predators: cats, dogs, monkeys, mongooses, and so on.
Yeah, and I think another question that's close to Rob's heart, speaking of things like cats, is are there any plans to try and control Mauritius's feral cat populations? And I know Rob was on the show a while back talking about his work understanding the impacts of cats in the Cape. Are there any plans on Mauritius, Vikash?
We do control, and I ask forgiveness from anybody there who are cat lovers, but we are really talking of feral cats in the forest that kill birds. So we have been controlling cats for a number of years now, but we can only do that in restricted areas. We can't do that over vast areas because it's very labor intensive. Now, what is happening is that in New Zealand, they are developing following the success of the A24, they are trying to develop a self-resetting cat trap. They are also developing I think it's a stoat trap. So if the stoat trap works well, it could be a self-resetting control for our mongooses. It just needs to be a bit large. The entrance needs to be a bit larger. But they're working their way up from rats to stoats to cats. So we are following the development, and hopefully if those work well, we may be able to increase the area over which we are controlling feral cats. But Mauritius, being the size that it is, I think we'll only be able to control cats on islands, if they get to islands, or on some areas. Currently, the largest area where we control cats is around 20 odd hectares.
Thanks, Vikash. Yeah, it certainly is incredible to see how these islands can be wonderful microcosms for things happening and sort of interventions that can be done and monitored on a very localized scale. I think there's a lot to be learned from the mainland conservationists, and I love that you pulled up towards the end of your talk all of the lessons that we can learn. And I've certainly thrived chatting with you and the MWF team about ways we can share knowledge and exchanges from your island's experiences into the African mainland. And I think we definitely will keep those conversations going. And thank you for being such a networker and advocate for opening those conversation channels. It's fantastic. You mentioned the echo parakeet, and I see Eugene here has answered a question. Is the echo parakeet related to the invasive ring-necked parakeet that we're finding here in South Africa? They certainly at first glance look very similar to each other.
Sadly, they are related. So what we know is that there were emerged islands from India all the way to Seychelles. There was a parrot on Seychelles. I think it was called Psittacula wardi. By the way, Psittacula has become Alexandrinus until somebody switches it back to Psittacula. But there was Alexandrinus wardi, and there was the echo parakeet on Mauritius. There was a parrot on Réunion, which I mentioned. And on Rodrigues, there was a turquoise parakeet. Beautiful, beautiful parakeet that went extinct in the late 1800s. Now, all of these parrots are descendants from the Indian ringneck parakeet. So they are cousins. We have Indian ringneck parakeets on Mauritius, and the Indian ringneck parakeet is a competitor with our echo parakeet, because they compete for nests, for example. And they also harbor PBFD, and they are more resistant to PBFD so they are a reservoir of PBFD. So it's a problem for us as well. And sadly, they are both related. But thankfully, they don't breed. We haven't had any cases of hybridization so far.
Okay, that's very interesting. Sure. So you mentioned some of the incredible work you're doing with your education and awareness work. My first question is from Robert, and he's asking whether you've got a lot of buy-in from your local population when it comes to trying to control some of these invasive species like cats, rats, and various other creatures that are causing problems for the indigenous Mauritian wildlife?
Rats, I think nobody really cares. Mongooses, nobody really cares. But when it comes to cats, there are some organizations and there are some people that are opposed to it. I think we have to explain that we are not trying to control the domestic cat. We are trying to control the cat which is going to kill birds in the forest. These are feral cats. We also tell people that a domestic cat very quickly can become a feral cat and become a killer in the forest. So these are the sorts of messages that we have. But we do have some people that that are opposed to our predator control work, in short. But what we've been trying to do is to make it as humane as possible. So, for example, you know, the A24 for rats is instant, rather than the poison, the Brotifacum, which the rat is living with for 7-8 days before dying, which is an atrocious death when you think about it. We've gone away from, and we are going away from Brotifacum and using those instant kill traps. So these are the sorts of things, and we have been working with some of the organizations. Sometimes when we've been catching domestic cats, we've been taking this to our local species protection agencies and giving them to them so that they can find places to rehome them. Sadly, it's not easy to rehome cats, but we've tried to do the next thing. You know, but on our education front, one of the angles that we have, one of the strands of our education program is pet keeping, responsible pet keeping. And please don't dump your unwanted pets in the forest, which a lot of Mauritians have been doing, including dogs. They also leave dogs in the forest, and we have feral dog populations as well. And sometimes they leave them on islands as well. So we get dogs on islands. So we do have to trap the dogs and send back to the mainland.
And it really does show the broad quiver of arrows we as conservationists have to hold, everything from responsible pet ownership to encouraging people to enjoy birds. Amazing, Vikash, sure. My last question tonight, because I see we are starting to run out of time, but this one kind of resonates with me, having been a young tourist who spent many a family holiday in Mauritius. Henny's asking whether you engage with the thousands of tourists that come to Mauritius, are probably completely oblivious to the wildlife beyond that very famous dodo that went extinct. And what are you doing to try and get these tourists that are coming to know about these incredible birds and the story that you've brought them back, and of course keeping them around and encouraging that indigenous value for what Mauritius has?
Now, the window on our conservation work is Îles et Grethes. Before COVID, we were welcoming nearly 18,000. We were going to welcome up to 18,000 visitors. We don't want to get a lot more visitors because, of course, we don't want to impact on the island. And there more than half, I think, were tourists. The rest were Mauritians and school children. So we welcome 3,500 school children, most of them for free, on Îles et Grethes. And we talk about our various conservation work. So the window to our conservation work is what we do on Îles et Grethes. On Rodrigues, we have been developing ecotourism at Grand Mountain Nature Reserve, where we've got very rare plants. We have the Rodrigues fody, the Rodrigues warbler, Rodrigues fruit bat. We've reintroduced tortoises as analogs. So we talk to people about the conservation work, and we are encouraging ecotourism. So we have supported Ferney Valley to develop their ecotourism. We've supported Ebony Forest. We've supported Domaine de Bellhomme on their ecotourism. And we give lectures about ecotourism. And we are trying to promote ecotourism in Mauritius. So we work with tour agencies and all of this. So we do try to tell about our programs through the various places that either we are managing or that we are encouraging ecotourism to develop one. But there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Absolutely, there always is, but it's so encouraging to hear, particularly with the local population, the work that you're doing, and what an amazing place to have to showcase what is being done in Ilory and all of those wonderful islands. Vikash, I think I could talk to you all night about this incredible place and the amazing work that you guys have done. Congratulations. Thank you. If you have any last sentiments you'd like to share with the audience, I'll give you the space now, and then I'll close us off for the evening.
Well, we're looking forward to having more visitors from South Africa and coming to discover our work. I always try to get out, and if I do come to South Africa, I really love to come and see the parrot at the Hoop Nature Reserve and the wonderful work that BirdLife South Africa is doing. I mean, congratulations to BirdLife South Africa. You rock when it comes to conservation in Africa. So I'm very admirative of what you do in South Africa as well. But anyway, let's keep those collaborations going, and I'm looking forward to developing business and biodiversity forums with you.
Thank you, Vikash, and likewise, we are always so inspired by our colleagues, and I think it really just epitomizes the beauty that is the BirdLife partnership and the ability to engage with partners from around the world and share our stories, our challenges, and grow together. So thank you for your partnership with BirdLife South Africa, and may we continue to all grow and succeed in the work that we're trying to do to save these wonderful things that we love, our birds. Right, everybody, that brings us to the end of our Tuesday night. Another fantastic episode, and I see many positive comments in the chat box, and Rob Simmons summing it up. This has been one of the most fascinating presentations I've seen on this forum. Rob, I could not agree with you more. Vikash, thank you. This was wonderful. I've had a blast hosting you. Thank you so much for sharing your extensive knowledge and your passion about Mauritius and its wonderful birds and the mascarenes in general. I cannot wait to get back there, and I hope that will be happening a bit later this year. But without further ado, everybody, please remember you can join us. There is a survey in the chat box for you to fill in when we finish tonight's webinar. Just pop in your thoughts on the show. And of course, don't forget that we will be back in 2 weeks' time with another show for you. We've moved it to every 2 weeks, and that seems to be helping everybody cope. But we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with a penguin talk. So following on from Vikash's great words about our penguin work, we will be sharing some of the exciting developments in the penguin conservation space. So we look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks' time. Thank you all for joining us on another Conservation Conversations. Without further ado, keep your eyes on the skies, keep enjoying those birds, and we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Good night, everybody, and thank you. Thanks, Vikash.
Bye. Good night.